Everyone, this is Keith Stone with the Center for Hellenic Studies at the Center for Hellenic Studies in Nafplio, Greece. And joining me via Google Hangout is Greg and Hélène, both of whom are in Olympia?
Yes,
no?
We just arrived in Olympia. We just arrived.
And also Sarah. So we're all in different locations, mostly. Let's see. Before we explain how some of us are in unaccustomed places this time, why don't we start with the discussion question about Croesus. Let me see okay, here it is. Let me read it out loud. For Herodotus, the story of Croesus is a key to understanding world history. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? It's a very simple question, but how are the answers? What were you thinking? Could I ask you that, Greg? What was your thought in prodding us to move the discussion in this direction?
Well, it's because it's so surprising that somebody like Herodotus, who on one side is very scientific, he's very proud of his scientific method, but on another side is very respectful of the traditions of myth and ritual, why he should pick of all topics to examine world history, why should he pick the story of Telos and then the story of Kleobis and Biton? It's such a personalized story almost, because in the end, if you look at Kleobis and Biton, and that's what I was really focusing on when I was thinking of the question. When you think of those two, you're really dealing with a very personal wish on the part of the priestess, who is the most important figure in the city of Argos, and how she prays for a making permanent of an ultimate moment of happiness. And happiness, is that somehow a keynote for world history? Some of our respondents thought maybe not. And I like the respondents' attempt in one case to say, look, Herodotus will make everything an up and down situation. It is first you think you're at the top of the world, then you're at the bottom of the world. Or you think you're great and then you're small, or you think you're small and then you're great. The cycle goes on, and I agree with that. But I think there's even more to it, that there is a kind of meditation on what is it to be transcendently blessed. And certainly the story of Croesus illustrates that wealth, power, and prestige will not be the ultimate answer. And that somehow connecting to the world of heroes, connecting with a goddess like Hera, may provide a deeper answer. So that's what I was thinking about, and I think the respondents all responded to the challenge, sometimes in different ways, but that made me happy too.
Thank you, Greg. I'm wondering, Sarah or Hélène, do you have perspectives you want to share, or other comments on the discussion board that you would like to highlight?
Well, I just wanted to say that yesterday we were at the exact place where, Kleobis and Biton climbed that hill with the mother and the child, and then they went up there, fell asleep, as Herodotus is telling us, and they died after that. So that was a very, very moving moment to be there.
And not only were we there, but how lucky we are not only to see this place again. In my case, I've seen it many times. You saw it for the first time.
Yes.
But it was so appropriate to the discussion question. I wish I could say that we timed it, because after all, the goddess Hera is the goddess of good timing. And this is a story of good timing, but let's just say that we didn't do it consciously. That hour 13, which is about the perfect moment of happiness and blessedness, should coincide with what is for me, and I think for you, dear Hélène, a perfect moment of seeing it in the poetics of space. There we were at the sanctuary of the goddess Hera, and here we are a day later discussing it with the group. Okay, now we've moved from where we were, which was the territory of Argos eventually, although it could be defined differently. It was the Heraion, the sacred place of Hera. And after a long trip from there to here in Olympia, we're now here, and it gets better. Tomorrow we head for Delphi, and then day after tomorrow, we see the statues of Kleobis and Biton in the museum in Delphi, which is to me another marvel. And I hope the participants out there don't mind that Hélène and I are sharing the happiness of actually being at the two relevant sites within days of this particular dialogue we're having with the wonderful people out there in our community of participants. It's just wonderful. It's a wonder.
Wow, that's amazing. It is quite a coincidence.
And it's good timing on the part of the goddess.
Yes, exactly. She's with us.
She must be with us.
You described it as a very moving moment, and it sounds as if you're feeling you're making connections in a different way. We've been reading the texts and we're reading out of those texts, but then you're also seeing things, and you describe it as a wonder. And that's actually quite important terminology for us to be thinking about, isn't it?
So it was a privilege. It's a real privilege.
Sarah, I wonder, not to make a pun, about the word wonder that you used and are thinking about. Do you mean some of the kind of miraculous hero-related happenings that Herodotus recounts?
Well, I was noticing Greg was using the word too, and I know that I've seen that sort of terminology being used in some of the texts, and as people make a connection with heroes, and that's something to maybe be thinking about as we kind of move forward. But then also I'd like to pick up on the, again, back onto the discussions. There's that word of hour 13, krinein, and thinking critically as well. Can we do both at once? Have that sense of wonder, but also that sense of judgment, and it sounds as if it's almost an intellectual thing, but it's a little bit more than that, I think, isn't it?
And you know, I sympathized with the respondent who said that it was confusing to hear the statement about history and how Herodotus begins, and are we really talking about Herodotus and what his opinion is, or are we talking about the story of Croesus, or are we talking about the overall story of the ups and downs of Croesus? And I would say, in my defense in asking that question, that I think all of those questions, just as this respondent phrased them, are interconnected. The narrative interconnects. So it's not that I think we should connect things. I think that they are connected, and in a way, people had a great deal of freedom in how to answer it. If people read hour 13, the discussion that I offer, I think they would be tempted to start with Kleobis and Biton, but they could have started with the more simple story of Delos, or pushed ahead to the story of how Croesus outsmarts himself, and the more he wants to protect somebody that he loves more than anybody else, the more doomed the whole project becomes. And that goes back to the statement of the participant I referred to earlier,
Yes.
where that participant is saying, well, Herodotus will try to fit everything in terms of the up and down of human fortune. But I'd say that's good too. It's part of what I think is a very systematic juxtaposition of traditional values and the world of human events as they actually play out in history.
Yes.
With perfect timing, very helpful Evan of the center here in Nafplio came and turned on some lights as the sun is going down.
Oh, I see it. And I hope, dear Keith, that people understood that when you said, hi, I'm at the Center for Hellenic Studies in Greece, Keith really meant that. He really is in Nafplion, which is, here's something else, seaport of Argos, which is the city that we're focusing on in our 13, especially in my early discussions of the Kleobis and Biton story. So again, Hero has done her work. I am full of wonder that things shook out the way they did for today.
On time.
It's really on time.
Yes.
If I could go back to Sarah, what you were saying about the nature of judging in connection with the keyword crenane and critical. I think that it isn't just an intellectual process. If I could kind of offer a response based on what I've learned from you, Greg, about hero cults, you can only make these kinds of decisions if you are not just mentally, but emotionally connected to the world of heroes. Well, that's good enough. You say the world around you, which is the world of heroes for the ancient Greeks.
And dear Keith, if I could just build on that a little bit, the emotional side of things is so present. There's the mother's love for her two sons, and how she wishes the kind of happiness that she feels for herself and for the boys because of what they did, and all the admiration that the community gives them, how this has just got to be permanent. That's so personal. And then as the story pushes on, if I could elaborate on my point that these themes are all connected, then you have the love of a father for a son and how he'll do anything to protect him from harm. And then the sadness that the more he tries to protect the boy, the closer the boy comes to the doom that he ultimately experiences, and then the doom that the father experiences. So it's one event after the other. It's like firing of synapses, one after the other. And there's all this emotion going on. Even the bodyguard, the poor bodyguard who has escaped from a guilt situation and gets into an even worse guilt situation.
Yeah. So.
It's heartbreaking. And there were traditions where people like Athenians were interested enough in this story that there were attempts to make a tragedy out of it. And I mean, okay, I'm using an anachronistic term, a staged tragedy. So then you ask yourself, wow, is it that Herodotus is aware even of tragedy? Answer, yes. He touches all the bases. He's so aware of every kind of verbal art, and he's really showing off that he knows so much poetry in the poetic tradition that comes before him.
You've mentioned this is verbal art, but you've also touched on the visual arts and that you are going to see these statues as well. So that we mustn't lose sight of the fact that there is visual art going on as well, that it expresses these stories, these myths, and these cults, right?
Yes, and the way Herodotus talks about, the Argives were so proud of all of this and so respected the two boys that they commissioned statues which were then sent to the sacred place of Delphi so that there they would be preserved forever. Well, then what happens? Herodotus would never dream that eventually those statues would disappear under the earth because of the various tectonic shifts in Delphi, and because first this place crumbles, then that place crumbles, and then how at the end of the 19th century, French archaeologists dig up the boys, so to speak. I shouldn't say it that way. they dig up the statues of the boys, and it'll be such a thrill for you and me, dear Elen, to go to a museum where the first thing they will see as you go into the museum, you're around the corner, and there they are. They're the boys, and so the presence that we saw on the hill, on the top of the hill, which we have to imagine is that's where they went to sleep, and they never got up again in the conventional way, because there is going to be some superhuman way of getting up, which is being resurrected into a hero called Fine. And then there we are in a museum, which comes as close to a sacred shrine in today's bleak world of post-modernity.
Right.
It comes as close to a sacred place as anything. And I so enjoy just experiencing with the fellow travelers the wonder they see. It's one thing to see pictures of the statues, but actually to see the statues.
Exactly.
Is again, what's that word? A marvel, a wonder, a thelma.
Yeah, the place itself is a wonder.
It is a wonder.
It is a wonder. Yes.
I have another thought, Greg, about the discussion question itself, and the wording towards the end of it about the relevance of the story of Croesus to world history. And I know that you've talked some, especially in relation to the story of Protesilaus and the fish, the sardine or something that comes alive, that Herodotus is, on one level at least, writing for the Athenians. So what would you have to say about the relevance for Croesus for the Athenians?
Dear Keith, I would say that Croesus comes closest to being a kind of proto-Athenian in the sense that he's very intellectual, he's intellectually curious, and he commits the same, shall we say, misstep of reducing quote-unquote free Greek cities into the status of tributaries, which is exactly what Athenians do later in the Athenian Empire. So just as there's an Athenian subtext at the beginning and an implicit criticism of Athens, which is a society that Herodotus very much admires, but a society that he recognizes commits major moral missteps, like reducing free cities to tributary status, which is exactly what Croesus does. And you ask yourself, well, is it so terrible what Croesus did? Eastern potentates are described as doing. They'll gouge out the eyes of their prisoners. They will cause boys to be castrated. They will impale people. They'll crucify people. What won't they do? Ooh, how barbaric. And for some reason, the biggest moral problem for Herodotus is not those atrocities, but the infringement on the political freedom of a city-state, which is something that Athens does, and Athenians think of themselves as benevolent in doing it. Or at least that's what Pericles says in something we don't read for this project, which is the funeral oration as staged by Thucydides in scroll 2 of his history. So I like your question a lot, Keith, because yes, the subtext of Athens and the moral problems of the Athenian Empire are very much present. And Croesus is the perfect prototype for what can go wrong with an empire, even if the empire fancies itself as benevolent and as an agent of civilization. Because Croesus was an agent of civilization too, just as Athens was.
Exactly. Yes.
Great. Thank you, Greg.
And I tell you, world history, and that's something, the way I phrased it in my question, is I think that's something we can all accept, is after we're sort of stunned into realizing how much detail Herodotus puts into the course of human affairs in the period that he covers. I mean, what else can we call it? It is as world history as you can get at the time that he's producing this in the late 5th century. So world history, that's not debatable, that's a given. What is debatable is how on earth we can start a world history. What's the point of starting a world history with these very emotional and, you know, I don't like to use the word religious, but ritualized and mythologized sacred narratives? Why? And why Athens and Argos? Well, that's pretty easy, because Athens and Argos were on pretty close terms in the era of Herodotus. They have different histories, but I like the fact that when Thucydides describes the beginning of the Peloponnesian War, he says, well, when the Peloponnesian War began, name A was Archon at Athens, names B were ephors at Sparta, and names, did I say 2 or B? Let's say 2. and name 3 was so-and-so who was priestess of Hera at Argos. That's the way calendars were done. Those were the 3 defining chronological points. And who's the goddess of chronology? Hera. Is that nice? And so the idea that you go right into Athens as a subtext, you go into the priestess of Hera, who is the third most important person in Greek history. And of course, you know, the office keeps changing, but the people of Argos record the names of the priestess. And I love the way he leaves the name blank for the mother, because he doesn't want to get too tied down with the chronology. And it's a good thing, because Kleobis and Biton are, shall we say, mythologized to the point where this is embarrassing, but when you actually look closely at the statue that we're going to see, they look like the boys, but as an art historian from Berkeley has proved, they're recycled, how shall I say, statues for the twins, the divine twins. But they were recycled to represent not the sons of Zeus, but Kleobis and Biton. And how do we know that they're recycled? Because there are traces on their boots. The only thing they're wearing is boots of little hermetic indications that they can fly, because the Dioskuroi, the sons of Zeus, can fly around. And so does that bother me that these statues, which were obviously there because they were commissioned, just as Herodotus says, as representations of Kleobis and Biton, but in real life, how shall I say real life? Okay, in earlier phases of the transmission, they even stood for different superhuman figures. Doesn't bother me at all. I hope it doesn't bother anybody out there.
It doesn't bother me.
It seems like a beautiful continuity and kind of coming full cycle and then starting again, but with a new wave of thinking or belief or,
yes,
or whatever. I think it's beautiful. I'm so excited to hear that you'll be actually seeing them for real, whoever and whatever they are, through all time. Wonderful.
I'm so glad that Sarah used the word wonder again. It is a wonder. And I think you can tell that Aileen and I are very happy travelers right now.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I wish you a very happy rest of the tour that you're on with some Harvard alums and some Harvard undergrads and some participants from HeroesX, including Aileen.
And you know, I just wish, and I'm sure we'll figure out a way to share this kind of experience even more with the participants out there, because we all feel that we're a community, and it gives, obviously, Aileen and me great delight to connect this directly with things that we love to read about, and now we are experiencing it in these two very distinct ways, in the poetics of the space where the whole belief system grew up, and then in the poetics of the space where the material culture artifacts are still there in a very venerated place, relatively speaking, in our society. It just can't get better.
All right. Well, that's a good place to stop. I think a wonderful high note to end on. So, unless there are any other last words, this is Keith Stone signing off for Office Hours. We'll see everyone next time.
Goodbye from Greece.